And to the angel of the church at Smyrna write, the first and the last, who became dead and lived, says these things. See, to a persecuted church, people who are facing death, here's the writer, here's the author, who himself has been dead. He has faced death. Not only did he face it, but he died. And as the promise to us, if you die for me, you shall live, so he demonstrated it. I died, who became dead and lived, says these things. I know your works and tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say among themselves that they are Jews, and they are not, but they are of the synagogue of Satan. Do not at all fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil will cast some of you into prison, so that you may be tried, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful to death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. Jesus, as I said, is our speaker here. He's speaking to the church in Smyrna. Smyrna was one of the 7 churches there in Asia Minor that Christ wrote to in the book of Revelation. We refer to them not only as churches, but also they represent what we might call church ages. More so, I think they also represent stages that you and I might expect to go through, not only as a church, but perhaps in individual lives. The early church, who was excited, exuberant, reminds us of those early days of our salvation. Smyrna gives way to persecution. The joy has left. And so now they are facing hard times. And yet Christ speaks to that church, and perhaps to that individual who was facing these difficulties. So let's consider what Christ has to say to Smyrna this morning. First of all, he reminds us that it is a temporal condition. This letter indicates that it was a condition of great trial. It refers to the words tribulation, poverty, and prison. But those are things that we experience in this world. And they are things that are fleeting. Nothing is everlasting. Nothing is eternal on this world. All things come to an end. The persecutions at Rome one day gave way. Salvation spread across the globe. And persecution seemed for a while to dim. It raises its head from time to time and from place to place. But who's to say what might change those things and those circumstances? Temporal, meaning temporary. But temporal, as he looks at it, he breaks it down into 2 parts. And I want you to see this. First of all, in temporal, therefore, since it is coming and going, there is first of all the trial that you are in. This present tribulation that he presents to Smyrna. They were in tribulation. This is a term which represents trials of all kinds. But the special trial here is mentioned as far as poverty. See, the city of Smyrna was rich. It was one of those competitors to Ephesus itself. It was a powerful and rich seaport. Had lots of money. But the Christians themselves found themselves to be poor. In a wealthy land, they had poverty. How could this be? Well, part of the persecution was, as we read earlier, you become a Christian, you lose your job. You become a Christian, you lose your family. You become a Christian, you lose your friend, you lose your support. And so here they were in the middle of a very wealthy city, and yet God points out to them, I know you're poor. I know no one is helping you. I know you don't have the money and the luxury that you once possessed. I know you gave that up for me. It's remarkable that in the midst of this trouble, in the midst of this trial, though often when we would say, God left me or God has forsaken me, he's thinking on us. Notice how aware he is of this trouble and of this trial. The trial you are in. The trouble that is currently bothering you. This present poverty. I know your poverty, he said. Christ notices the secular conditions of his churches. He knows exactly how much money this church has in the bank. And he knows exactly how many bills are coming our direction. He's well aware of these things. I remember, and I share so often with you, just to remind you of God's goodness. I remember when I got here. And the church met with me and said, Pastor, in 6 months, we're going to have to close the doors. Do you realize that was almost 15 years ago? And the doors are still open. In fact, we had to just replace one of the doors because somebody threw a rock through it. And we're still here. The world would look and say, how? That can't be. But God is aware of this church. He knows exactly the number of people in this pew today. He knew all those who were going to come and ended up not. He knows all those circumstances and situations. Nothing catches him off guard. I know your poverty. I know the city you are in, and I even know how rich your city is. I know how much money Ontario has. I know how much money is in LA County. Listen, I know that California is the 7th largest economy in the world. And hey, you're having trouble paying the bills. You might think it's a little strange. Why should we, in the richest country in the nation, the richest country, I should say, in the world, and then we find ourselves in the richest state in that country, and then we are in the richest county in that state, in that country, in that world? There is, absolute phenomenal. When you talk about monies, you're talking about trillions. America went from 7 trillion before Donald Trump to 14 trillion after him. Doubled the economy. How much money is there? And yet I know you're in the middle of all that wealth, and I know you don't have any. He said to them. I know the businesses are booming, but I know that they're not sharing any of it with you. No one wants to share with the church. But he knows those things. Though they are distinguished by a great spiritual excellence was theirs, I know your works. I know the persecution you're enduring. See, I know your poverty, but I also know your wealth. And your wealth is your character. What did Jesus leave to the church? Did he leave behind and say to the church, here is all the gold on 1,000 hills and the cattle in every mine, or however that goes? I guess it's the cattle on the hill and the gold in every mine. I could have left you valuable wealth. I could have brought all the minerals of the universe and laid them at the feet of the church, and the church would be abundantly rich. But he didn't give us any of that. I have nowhere to lay my head. Oh, I know that the streets of heaven are paved in gold, but I didn't give you any of that. What did he give the church? He left behind instead his character. This is how you should behave. This is what you should strive for. Listen, you should be like me. And you should want to tell people about me. And I will help you to accomplish that task. One of the reasons our doors are still open is because we're still trying to tell people the good news of Jesus Christ. And he's still helping us accomplish that. Christ said to them, you are rich. Spiritually, you're rich. You ought to see what you have up here. Oh, I know you can't see any of it down there. But you should see what you're building up here. You should see the souls that are planning to come through that gate because of what you're doing. Peter and John, when they were at the temple, they said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus of Nazareth, stand up and walk." In the name of Jesus of Nazareth. What is it we can give to people but Jesus of Nazareth? We are followers of the way. That was the name for the early church. Followers of that way. What way? The way of the cross. The followers of the Nazarene, as they are triumphantly called today. They were called Christians first in Antioch. Today in Iraq, they're called Nazarenes. Whatever we are called because we are like him. That was the treasure that he left us. What should a man gain if he should inherit the whole world and lose his soul? What would a man give in exchange for his soul? The persecuted church keeps saying to us over and over again, don't pray for my poverty, pray for my faith. Great is your faith. And if you remain faithful, you shall receive a crown of life. I, who was dead and now live, am saying to you who might die, you too shall live. What a close... He really knows these people because he has been down that path. He has faced that persecution. He's done nothing wrong. Pilate said it. Even the thief on the cross declared to the other guy, this man has done nothing wrong. When the Jews who were persecuting Christ were asked, what did he do wrong? Well, he claims to be the Son of God. Yeah, for me to make that claim would be wrong. For you to make that claim would be wrong. But for Christ to make that claim, he was right. He is the Son of God. In this world, a man's secular condition is not always determined by his moral character. The world doesn't care much about our morals. In fact, you get further if you have no morals. Society today cheers on those who have no moral character. We are encouraged, in fact, by our leaders to be immoral, disrespectful, dishonoring, hateful, bigoted. But Christ says to us, be like me. That's what he left us. The treasure is to be like Christ. Christ in you, the hope of glory. That's the great treasure. And the world knows nothing about it. See, in this temporal, there is the trouble that you are currently in. And the trouble that we are currently in is we're not like Christ, to be quite honest. But you're facing trials, you're facing tribulation. I understand that, Jesus said. But I'll tell you one thing. Here's the thing about temporal troubles. There is the one you are in, and there's the one that's still coming. Wow, how well does he know this old world? There are, yes, troubles you are in. And someday they will pass. And guess what's going to happen? When that trouble, when that trial, when that tribulation passes, there's another one coming around the corner. So why pray, Lord, take me out of this mess? He says, I'll take you out of that mess, but all I'm going to be doing is taking you out of one mess after another and after another. As the sparks fly upward, a man is born to adversity. So we have this perspective, tribulation. If this one passes, and you know that, how many times have you had a hard time? Oh, Lord, just get me through this. You knew you were lying when you prayed that. You didn't mean just get me through this. You meant, Lord, get me through this and don't ever let another one come my way. Right? Isn't that what we honestly, if we're going to be honest, that's what we'd say? But consider then the one that is coming. It could be worse than the first. How often have we found that to be true? Oh, Lord, I had this problem, and then all of a sudden I'm facing a bigger one. But to the church at Smyrna, let's go back to them, and to the persecuted church, he lays it on 4. I'm going to limit it to 3 because I don't know that I could count the Jews anymore today as a real worldwide persecutor. Unless you're in Israel, then you might find them to be truthful. But I think the other 3 are still very, very relevant. If the Jews could stand for 2 types of religion, after all, there's only 2 kinds of religions. There is the religion that says, he did it for me and I can do nothing for myself. And this is all the real conflict of the world. Or there is the world that says, look what I did. I made it here by myself and I didn't need his help. That's what it comes down to. He paid it all, or he paid none of it. I did it or he did it. And most of us live on the I did it side. Those of us who are Christians will all go over here and say, no, he did it. I could not help myself. I could not. And the world says, I did. What do you mean when they look at God in the face? I didn't. No, only the way of the cross leads home. There's no other name given under heaven whereby men must be saved than Jesus Christ. Jesus himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes unto the Father but by me. See, when we deal with false religion, there's only 2 religions in the whole world. Jesus did it, or I did it. And most of the world claims I did it. They're all the I did it religion. That's how simple it is. You don't need to know everything about it. Stop and consider any other religion other than Christianity. What does they claim? That they had to do something. It's all a religion of work. I did the work. I struggled. I'm better than you. See, that's what I get to say. If I get to heaven on my own, I get to say I'm better than you. If Jesus did it for me, then I am no better than you. And how good does that sound to say, I'm no better than you? Everybody wants to say, I'm better than you. That's the whole fun of living, is to look at somebody and say, you know what? I am better than you. But he took that all away. That's why we don't like him in this old world. Because he said he did it all. You and I know that that's true. He did it. He paid my sin debt. I am free because of what he has done. I am of that religion that says he did it all. All to him I owe. But of this perspective trial, of this trial that is coming, the instigator, according to Jesus, for the most part, of real persecution, not the kind we bring upon ourselves. There's some of us who face troubles and trials because we caused it ourselves. I neglect to pay my bills and then I get mad because somebody comes and says, you owe. Lord, look at me, I'm being persecuted. No, hey, you should have paid that last month, God would say to you and me. That's not a persecution, and that's not something that I brought up. You thought you could get away with ignoring it, and you can't. This whole world likes its money, and they like it to come from you. But in real persecution, Jesus says that the devil is an instigator. He works in the children of disobedience to inspire them. And how many children does he have? How many disobedient children are there? And how often do we, for a brief time, join that rank? He works in the children of disobedience. All those who are on that I am doing it myself side, which is a lot greater than he did it for me side. All those people, the Chinese, the Koreans, the Iraqis, the Iranians, they all join together. They're all the children of disobedience. They choose not to know Jesus Christ. They have deliberately chosen, to stand in opposition to him. And so the devil inspires them to do wicked and heinous things. You look at some of those cruelties and you have to say to yourself, that was inspired by the devil himself. Years ago, when that wicked man took that little knife or saw and he was sawing off that guy's head, Though the guy was screaming through the pain, he didn't stop. He literally, his knife and his axe and whatever couldn't cut, and so they're trying. How evil is that? They were inspired by the devil. That works in the children of disobedience. And that man was disobedient. And so it was easy for the devil to use him in a wicked and heinous way that a normal man would not do. There had to be a man who was possessed of the devil himself. And so it's not surprising then that persecution is around the world, because they are all the children of disobedience. All that say, I will do it myself, will come after us someday, because we're going to step on their toes and say, you can't. And people don't like to hear that they can't. Look at the form, not only the instigator, the devil, but the form. Cast into prison for the Samaritans. Incarceration in some respect is worse than martyrdom, because in incarceration you live without light, without freedom, and without fellowship. You ask men who have been imprisoned, who are imprisoned alone. You ask those who have been stranded somewhere. The hardest part of it is to be alone, to know you're not getting out. We have a hope of release someday. This man knew that his release would only come through the end of a blade, if at all. He was separated from other people so he might not contaminate them with his Christianity. It is a hard and lonely, left in that dark dungeon, without light, without freedom, without fellowship. This is what makes things difficult. Cast into prison? Hard. The sentence of death comes one day and you're delivered, you're free. Then all of a sudden you're walking the streets of heaven. They long for the death rather than to be imprisoned. If you're going to come and take me, then come and take me. Don't make me wait day after day, month after month, year after year. Continually being beaten and abused while in their hands. Waiting instead to be cared for by the angels themselves. Its duration, see, this is the thing, it will end. You shall have tribulation 10 days. 10 days. Symbolic of it's going to end. Either they will crucify you, murder you, somehow they're going to release you from this world and let you fly to glory. But it has a time limit. God is in control. He even said how long that persecution can last. The devil can't do anything that God doesn't want him to do. But he has inspired the children of disobedience to act fast and foolishly while they can act. He knows his days are numbered. He knows that one of these days Christ himself will split the eastern sky and his time is over, and he himself will be bound for 1,000 years. While Jesus Christ rules and reigns upon this planet. More than that, though, it's a spiritual obligation that we have. This letter from Jesus himself to the persecuted church inculcates in it two duties that they have. The first of these duties given to them is courage. Fear none of these things. See, isn't that what they're asking us to pray for? Pray that I will have courage. Pray that I won't be afraid. Help me to get this thing that Jesus is asking of me. Jesus says, don't be afraid. Then, Lord, ask your children around the world to pray that I won't be afraid. That I won't be afraid that they might come back into my house and get me again. And because of that fear, I might desert you or leave you. I live in fear that my mom and dad might not accept us back into the home, and so I'm willing to change. Lord, don't let me fear. Lord, you know in this rich and powerful city we are poor. No one wants to help us. So courage, fear none of these things. Why shouldn't I fear? Because you're rich. Don't fear that poverty. Why? Because you are rich. I'm afraid of not having money. Why? You are rich. You are rich in faith and you are rich in hope. You are rich in divine promises. You are rich in fellowship with God Himself. Fear not. And then the other thing He asks of them is what we might call fidelity. If you were a Marine, you would know this. Semper fidelis. Faithful forever. Forever faithful. That's what the Marines often holler. You hear them Marines? Semper Fi. Faithful forever. What did Jesus say to the church? Semper Fi. That was hard for a sailor to stand up here and utter the word Semper Fi, I got to tell you. But hey, if Jesus wants to sound like a Marine, let him sound like a Marine. He promised to come back too. Fear none of those things. Be faithful unto death. Be faithful. How long do I have to be faithful? You only have to be faithful so long as you're in this world. You notice you don't have to have faithfulness in heaven? You ever read about saints in heaven being faithful? No. They don't need faith in heaven. They have God Himself sitting with them. How much faith does it take to believe the guy on the throne? How much faith does it take to trust in Jesus when He walks up to you with those nail-pierced hands in glory and say, hey, how you liking that house I built for you? Remember I said I came to earth. Why? So I might learn the art of carpentry. Why? Because in my Father's house are many mansions. I built that for you. Wow. How hard is it to be faithful in heaven? I got to think you don't need faith in heaven. I think you arrived. So how long do I need to be faithful? You need to be faithful till the day you die. Under persecution, that might seem hard to do. And so what do our brothers and sisters say to us? Pray that I will have courage and not fear, and pray that I will stay faithful unto death. Listen, I walked all this way. Don't let me quit now. Don't let me quit now. Don't let me quit now. The extent of their faithfulness unto death. And secondly, the reward of this faithfulness, I will give thee a crown of life. When you die, you shall live. He who dies and believes in me shall live. And not just live, but shall live with me evermore. Not just live on this world again. Can you imagine the curse of reincarnation is that you keep coming back to this world? Maybe as a grasshopper or a caterpillar next time around. A cat or a dog, depending on how you behave, such is their religion. I like the religion of Jesus so much better, where He says, come and live with me. Where my body is glorified and age attacks no more. Where I shall truly be like Him. That's the reward of my faithfulness. I will give thee a crown of life. Lord, let my faithfulness be strong enough that I might die for thee. That's their prayer. Let my faith be strong enough to die for thee.